In Columbia, PA stands the historic Columbia Market House. This site functioned as a town hub off and on since the early 1800s. The current structure was built in 1869. What you may not be aware of, though, is the dark history that lies beneath the building. Descending down below, you will see a long hallway with 7 rooms, each roughly 15 square feet. These rooms were used as jail cells in the late 1800s. This basement is commonly referred to as the dungeon.
This was a very damp and dismal type place to stay, historically. During the 1800s, we had 23 bars, 28 hotels, a lot of railroad station, a lot of movement in town, a lot of industrialization. So you had drinking. You had a good time in town of Columbia, but you had the rowdy ones. You had to get, you get people who had to take it another step and get drunk.
Drunks were the most common inhabitants of these cells, many of which would stay a few days, learn their lesson, and be released. There is, however, one solitary confinement cell in the dungeon. It is entirely metal-plated, with no windows. Some of the hardy constables in Columbia at the time, most notably Constable Campbell, would not go easy on these rowdy criminals.
Campbell didn't want to take the prisoners through and cause a scene, so this place was really bustling. So it's a 6-day market, so there's half-moon grates out front. They're a lot smaller now, but they were probably a lot bigger back then. Now, you got to remember, back in the 1800s, people are a lot smaller compared to what we are today. So what he would do is slide that grate out front and then slide you down into these cells, which would be, make sure you go feet first, don't head first, because you're gonna have a heck of a hangover. So, but it was one way to control. So you pass it along to your friend at the bar, say, don't get busted by Campbell, because you're gonna go down the sliding board.
It is interesting to note that a couple of famous people spent the night here.
So one of the people who come to Columbia to do an exhibition fight was John L. Sullivan, the bare knuckle champion of the world. So he comes to Columbia, does an exhibition fight, decides to drink a little too heavy. So Constable Campbell was the one that grabs him and decides to bring him down in one of these jail cells to stay for the night. The following year, Lancaster newspaper says he comes back to do another exhibition fight with white eyes and no stagger to his walk, which I thought was like he didn't want to get drunk in Columbia again. Another famous person was actually caught driving an electric car on Locust Street, speeding 20 miles an hour. Eventually Campbell gets him for speeding, puts him down here in one of the cells, and became 0 miles per hour in one of the cells, as Campbell says, and that was Thomas Edison. So I'm not sure if he was the one who said it was too dark down here to invent light bulbs to get it brighter, but to have Thomas Edison spend the night down here, he must have been a really cocky person to get busted.
Clammy, damp air and a fetid stench all amplified the subterranean suffering these criminals had to endure. This type of incarceration was fortunately short-lived.
It started getting to the point when you put so many people into the drunks, and so many people in one of these cells, it's dark, it's damp, there's wooden floors in here. So you remember, you only get a bucket of water, a bucket to go to the bathroom, and one cot. So missing the bucket was mostly prominent for anybody who was drinking heavy that night. So the floors would get saturated. Eventually there was a gentleman running for county government, and he actually came down here in 1896 and called these cells the Hole of Calcutta. That's how bad it was down here, the stench. So the Board of Health eventually comes down and closes this down in the early 1900s.
Through the years, the dungeon was converted to a tourist attraction. With its dark history, it has also been a hotspot for paranormal research. Although criminals no longer inhabit these cells, legend has it that spirits still do.
When I used to come down and set this up, I had so many paranormal experiences. At one time, I got so scared to come down here to set up because I felt them down here. I'm here by myself. So my brother Mark would bring me down just to ease my mind. But some of the things we saw, black mass, were actually where I'm sitting right now, only about 2 feet away. We saw a black mass climb up the wall and went to the ceiling and started coming down the hallway towards us. And it got about halfway down until we took off upstairs. And my brother's a non-believer, but he ran faster than I did. We have names of Andrew who paces through the walls. We have John who lives in solitary. We have Huggendoubler, which is another paranormal investigator my mom used to let in. He actually would sit down here in the dark and actually converse with Huggendoubler. And he's not even from Columbia. Huggendoubler is a common Colombian name back in the day. And then we have the guy who they can't identify. He doesn't like women. He's in cell number 3. So if you're a woman, don't go in that cell overnight because he's going to get you.
The newly renovated market house can be a bustling and cheery place on a Saturday morning. With community events aplenty, the market house is slowly returning to its former glory.
There's always events coming through here, craft shows. I have a train show coming up. I try to keep this building as active as it can be, so it doesn't fall into shelter, and we want to keep this alive because remember, we don't keep this alive upstairs, these people don't stay alive down here, so, you know, we always got to keep the spirits alive. You know?